We're all set for qualifier number 2. 2 teams still in it, and one of them will play the Mumbai Indians in the final in a couple of days' time. Sunrisers Hyderabad against the Delhi Capitals is where our attention lies. It's the second qualifier in Abu Dhabi, and it was against the Delhi Capitals that Hyderabad decided on the 27th of October. They're going to turn things around. They haven't faced defeat in the tournament since. They won 4 games on the trot. And you'd think now they enter this with some serious momentum. On Whirlpool presents ESPN Cricket for T20 Timeout, powered by Dell. We're going to look ahead to that game. Since the last time I spoke to Tom Moody and Sanjay Manjrekar, the powers in the Western world have changed. So let's get them in and on board and figure whether the powers in the IPL have changed as well, whether there's a serious momentum behind the Sunrisers Hyderabad. Tom Moody knows exactly what that feeling is when the Sunrisers get on a red-hot streak into the playoffs. Tom.
Yeah, look, absolutely. But any side, for that matter, that gets on a run of wins leading into the pointy end of the tournament is a huge advantage. It's great to win games at any stage in a tournament, but the most critical time to feel like you're playing seamlessly is towards the finals or at finals time. You know, the Sunrisers will not be thinking of the what-ifs. When you're a side that have lost a couple of games, you are collectively and individually thinking of, what if I don't hit the ball cleanly over the top and I get caught at mid-off? Or what if I go for that wide Yorker and it is a complete wide? So there's a lot of negative thoughts that go through one's head when you're not winning many games, which certainly Delhi have done to this point of the tournament.
Yeah, that's the other thing, isn't it, Sanjay? You would love for this to be a clash between 2 really good teams and we, on a similar sort of page, and then you find out which one's better on the night to play the Mumbai Indians. But you do sense, like Tom said, with Delhi, there are still so many questions that feel aren't answered.
The best part about the IPL, I've always believed, is the length of the tournament. Because in the end, the team that stays strong is the team that deserves to win. When you have a short T20 tournament, sometimes you get distorted results. A team that has had a couple of good weeks tend to win the title here. You've got to be good for, 2.5 months almost. And look at Delhi Capitals. We all did our previews before the IPL started. And Delhi Capital was standout Final Four for all of us. And Sunrisers Hyderabad, very few picked. But as it turns out, the team that remains strong, the pitches started suiting Sunrisers Hyderabad as well. The youth, which was looked at as the strength of Delhi Capitals, is now coming to plague them a little bit because the guys who have gone off the boil a bit are struggling to come back into form soon enough.
Right. Now, how big a toss would this have been for someone like the Delhi Capitals? You feel like Sunrisers are on a bit of a roll, and if they would have won the toss, they would want to say they would have chased anyway. As it turns out, Shreyas Iyer has done something which few captains have in recent times, and that's decide to have a bat first. Let's make sense of that decision. And Sanjay, while we were looking ahead to this game, we had a chat yesterday too, and you said it's a no-brainer. If Delhi win the toss, they must bat first. Forget whatever the records and the numbers say of the last few games. Make sense of that?
Yeah, because they're obviously a team that's short of confidence. The other team is a little more settled. So when you're in that kind of mindset, then you go back to what is your strength. Now, Delhi Capitals had a great first half, and a lot of their wins came when they batted first and put up a big score. This is a team that has got a 200 batting first. They've got a 196 batting first, 228 batting first. So they've gone back into the comfort zone because a lot of their batsmen are out of comfort zone. And also, sometime that happened with us in 1996 in the World Cup semi-final. We thought, Sri Lanka is so good at chasing. Let's put them in. So that could be another thing because Sunrisers Hyderabad have been great at chasing down targets. But I think the right decision has been made by Delhi Capitals, knowing their limitations. And the toss was, in the end, unnecessary, I thought.
You can understand this decision by Delhi, Tom?
Yeah, look, I can. I think when it comes to finals, unless there's a ridiculous advantage through conditions, whether that be pitch conditions or the overhead conditions with dew and what have you, to me, you can't focus too much on what your opponent would like to do or not like to do. I think you need to focus more on what is best suited for you. More often than not, you protect your weakness. And to me, at the moment, Delhi Capital's weakness is their batting. So they're protecting that by not putting it under pressure in a pressure run chase. So they're saying to their batting group, look, just get us a score. We're going to back our fielding and we're going to back our bowling unit to see us through to get to the final against Mumbai. We're not going to expose our batting to the pressure of having to chase a 160, 170, 180, whatever the total may be.
Let's talk about Delhi's team, shall we? They've made a couple of changes. Some were actually predicted by this panel ahead of this game. That is that Shimron Hetmyer, they had to find room for Shimron Hetmyer, and he returns, the West Indian batsman. Out goes Prithvi Shaw. There is a swap between the bowlers as well. Daniel Sams, after 3 wicketless games, finds himself out of the team. We thought Harshal Patel would be a likely replacement, but they've gone for the leg spin of Praveen Dubey, played just the one game earlier this season himself. And you'd assume now Ajinkya Rahane would bat at the top of the order. Tom, give me your first thoughts on those changes.
Yeah, look, I like the changes. The only one that I probably wouldn't have gone with, which I mentioned the other day, is I wouldn't have picked the leg spinner. I would have gone with Harshal Patel. I just think another medium pacer that has got those change of pace deliveries in the middle of the innings is probably going to be more beneficial. And particularly the way that David Warner tends to play leg spin, they could be protecting Dubey for a long period of time if Warner's at the crease for some time, because he just generally, eats leg spinners alive. So that then creates a bit of a challenge to when you do bring him into the attack. But Hetmyer was a no-brainer. What's going to be intriguing is to where he is going to be positioned in the batting order. Personally, I hope he bats at 3. I think they need a change of attitude. They need a change of swagger. They need a change of confidence at the top of the order. And I think Hetmyer, with that sort of real sort of Caribbean freedom, can bring that to at that number 3 position.
Sanjay?
See, Delhi Capital's problem is not so much their bowling. Their bowling has been okay. And Praveen Dubey, perhaps they felt, after Amit Mishra, they needed a leg spinner, so he comes in. It's good that they've got an Indian leg spinner instead of a Lamit Chane, so they had to replace an overseas player. Now, when I look at Delhi Capital's batting, Tom is absolutely right. If they have to win this game, their batsmen obviously have to get runs. That's a no-brainer. But the batting order is crucial. Now, when I look back at Delhi's history this season, it all started going pear-shaped for them when Rishabh Pant got injured. And they got Alex Carey back in and left out Shimron Hetmyer. And I thought that was a big event for them in that season, because this guy had got 45 of 25 in the previous innings. And they dropped him because they didn't have a choice of a keeper, so they had to drop an overseas professional. And since then, Hetmyer hasn't been the same. He's batted at number 3 for Delhi Capital start of the season. So I'm with Tom. Get all those guys who have emotional baggage down the order, free them up. You're batting first to make yourself freer. Free them up even more. Have Hetmyer at number 3, maybe Stoinis at 4, Shreyas Iyer 5, Rishabh Pant with 4 overs to go can be a dangerous player. And we've seen a lot of teams, especially Mumbai Indians, change the game in the last 4-5 when people like Hardik Pandya go berserk. Ajinkya Rahane is an interesting choice. They've gone for the more safe option, but we know when Ajinkya Rahane gets runs, what kind of an impact he has. If Prithvi Shaw had got runs, he perhaps would have made a match-winning difference, but it was just too much of a gamble because of the way he was getting out of late.
I'm going to have a Prithvi Shaw chat in just a bit, but while we're at the discussion of the batting order for Delhi, Tom, Rahane and Dhawan together, if you say that pre-tournament or pre-season, whether that would be the ideal opening pair, I'm not sure a lot of coaches or a lot of people would have been very excited about it. Our in-house analysts did suggest that perhaps a punt could be to send Marcus Stoinis out, who is preferred, who has batted up there in the BBL, who is looking like the batsman in form, and could have some sort of X-factor impact up top, looking at how he played last game as well. Would you be tempted by that in any way?
Yeah, look, I would be tempted, but I would then be concerned to where you bat Rahane. And I think ideally his best position is at 1 and 2. We've seen him bat at 3, and more often than not, when he's batted at 3, he's been in very quickly. So he's virtually opening the innings. So to me, it's important that you put the right people on the right seats on the bus. And to me, that change would just sort of, again, confuse the batting order. I get the Stoinis thing. What I would do with Stoinis is consider him as an option instead of Hetmar at 3. So to me, it's either Stoinis at 3 or Hetmar at 3. At the beginning of this show, I said Hetmar, but I wouldn't be overly phased if it was Stoinis at 3 and then Hetmar at sort of a 5 and 6 to do that finishing power job. But one of the two have to bat 3. But I certainly wouldn't be changing the Shikhar Dhawan, Ajinkya Rahane opening pair. We've got to also remember Shikhar Dhawan is up there again as one of the leading run scorers in this tournament. But interesting enough, his strike rate is up there with the best. He's over 140 with his strike rate. So it's not a strike rate that we have seen from Shikhar Dhawan over a career. This is only just recent, the last 5 innings.
Yeah, Tom, they've been very cheeky. The moment he started talking about strike rate, they're showing you the last 5.
That's very unfair. Very unfair. If you look at his IPL season, this season's strike rate, it's 140, just over 140. So that's up there with the best. So you just got to bank that he's going to play with that freedom at the top, and Rahane will play that more of an anchor role and bat deep in the innings.
It's a funny one, isn't it, Sanjay? If you would have looked at the Delhi Capitals 3 or 4 games into the season when Prithvi Shaw had got 3 or 2 half centuries and a 40-odd in his first 5 innings of the tournament and said they're going to make the playoffs, but in the qualifier, Rahane and Dhawan are going to be your openers and there's going to be no place for Prithvi Shaw. It makes me sort of have the discussion on Prithvi Shaw as well. There'd be enough people baying for his blood, saying, look at how he's getting out, look at he's done, drop him and whatnot. I'm going to ask both of you this question. What has this season taught you about handling a player like Prithvi Shaw, who started so well? And it's not often we see in the IPL that a player who starts well tapers off so miraculously towards the end. Sanjay?
See, we saw signs of Prithvi Shaw's impetuosity. Is that the word? When he was playing for Delhi Capitals the season before last, he played some cameos, but he's been inconsistent. That has been his thing in T20 cricket. And clearly there's something about him. He's one of those guys who will put good balls, away for 4s and 6s. But again, the length of the tournament is the key here. So only the guys with a strong mind who are able to come back, bounce from a couple of innings of failures, are the guys who make a mark. Look at David Warner. Didn't have a great start, but mentally tough, was able to gather himself, and when it matters, he's back to his best. Shikhar Dhawan, couple of consecutive hundreds, brilliant first half, last 4 innings, just saw his numbers. So the length of the IPL, actually in many ways like Test cricket, separates the boys from the men, and Prithvi Shaw has learned a lesson that a few good innings is not an IPL season, and that form has to be carried. So I think the key here is that batsmen who make a mark and our long-term successes are ones who bounce back from failures quickly, and Prithvi Shaw hasn't, Shreyas Iyer hasn't, Rishabh Pant hasn't, and that is what is hurting Delhi Capitals.
I'm no coach, Tom, but I think the easier job is when someone started the season well to just keep that going rather than someone who's looking woefully out of form and trying to get him to get back to his game. What have you made of Prithvi Shaw's season and the massive up and down that he's had?
To me, when I look at Prithvi Shaw, I see an exceptionally gifted, talented ball striker, but I also see someone that doesn't understand his game, doesn't understand what the recipe is for his ability to be consistent in this format of the game. We know that the different formats present different challenges and different methods of play, but given that we're focusing just on T20 cricket, I think Prithvi Shaw, to me, looks confused with regards to what is his method, what is his recipe that he brings out every single day when he walks out to bat. To me, that looks different every time I see him bat. You look at those experienced players that Sanjay's talking about, they understand what it is that they need to bring to the table every time they walk out to bat. And that's why they're resilient, and that's why they manage to ride the highs and lows and the challenges that this game brings you. So Prithvi Shaw and a bit Pant's the same, but both of them, I think, just haven't quite got their head around what their method is. And as soon as which they will do in time, but what they need to do is understand that, then repeat it continually and not change it and believe in it and stay with that. And once they do that, you'll have that consistent player.
Ronak, can I just make a quick point? The big takeaway and the starting point is, let's remember this IPL is happening in the UAE and not in India. In India, the average first inning score has been about 170, 75. And in UAE, not this IPL, but generally has been about 150. So these pitches have tested a few batsmen. In India, there are a lot of pitches which allows you to get back into form easily. So the big takeaway from this IPL for me, especially because it was played in UAE, that maybe this romanticism that Tom Moody mentioned about young raw fast bowler that we talked about in an earlier show, I think now that also has to be looked at. All these young players who have hitting ability, who have the T20 game. It's very important that they also have a strong mind, some kind of experience, some kind of street smarts. So not just going for T20 experts. And we see a lot of young players that have been drafted into the playing 11. Abdul Samad is an example. But if you have a long season like we have in the IPL and the pitches are challenging, you rather go for guys who have actually seen this before in their lives. Hardened, seasoned, first-class batsmen. They may not be the best strikers of the ball, but they'll know how to bounce back from failures, how to handle pressure.
Right. This is such an intriguing conversation. I want to get back to the game. I'm just going to digress for a second with Sanjay, perhaps, because this you'd think now is the end of Prithvi Shaw's IPL. If Delhi win today, they'll probably stick with the same team. And if they lose, then that is the end of the entire season. So I'm just thinking, next assignment, Australia. You still have a test opener. And I know where you stand on IPL form for test selection or positions. But has the spiral for Prithvi downwards and the Rahul season upwards in any way going to play a part in who opens in the first test in Australia in over a month's time, Sanjay?
I'd love Tom also to get into this conversation, and let's be very brief because I know you've got to go back to the match, but this is something that gets talked a lot on social media. And I'm worrying about this trend that, can understand fans thinking in a certain way, but you see the important decision makers also think like that. Because for the life of me, I cannot understand how you can see test form in a T20 performance. 50 overs, yes. And we've seen people like KL Rahul have a fantastic IPL and struggle in test matches. 5 series on the trot, hasn't got the runs. We've seen Murli Vijay in 2014 have a rotten IPL, go to England and become one of the highest scorer in test cricket. So this dangerous trend where people are looking at form, especially in a tournament that is highly visible. Nobody's watching first-class cricket, but they forget that this is a T20 tournament. And there are some bowlers who are not even international class, and test match cricket is a completely different ball game. And this is a slightly worrying trend for me. So that's why when people start talking about form, I interrupt them and I ask them, which form are you talking about? Is it T20, 50 overs, or test cricket?
Right. Tom?
Yeah, look, I agree with that. I don't think they relate at all. One thing that does relate is how a batsman is getting out, and if there's any technical issues that have crept in because of T20. What you do find at times, particularly with batsmen and bowlers to a certain degree, their technique can just drift a little bit because of the pressures of T20 cricket and some subtle adjustments that you make to search for power against search for a robust technique which is required in Test cricket. So that would be something that I'd be monitoring more than the runs. So I'd be looking at, well, Prithvi Shaw, how is his technique? Is it still in good shape to take on a Test series in Australia? Are there issues there or things that we need to address?
All right. You know what? I think I've been guilty of getting into a conversation that actually needs a lot more time to get around.
But I think this is uppermost in the fans' mind. So Ronak, absolutely right about bringing that up, especially with the big news of Prithvi Shaw's IPL now coming to an end. He's been dropped, and as you said, if they win, he won't play the finals.
Yep. All right. Fair point. Now make what you want of it. Will we see a completely different Prithvi Shaw down under? That's anyone's guess, but that's the end of what's been a rather fascinating story, whichever way you look at it, of how players talented as Prithvi Shaw doesn't find himself part of a qualifier 2 or a playoff 11 for the Capitals. The other change that has been made, quick reference to that, Praveen Dubey gets a game now, and he's come in instead of well, he's this like-to-like swap you'd think for a bowler in Daniel Sams, and the Indian overseas balance to be maintained. Now, does that have anything to do, Sanjay, with Adam Zampa and Yuzvendra Chahal on this surface a couple of days back, conceding 36 between them and just getting a couple of wickets? Tempted to play the leg spin option, even if it's a rookie like Ravin Dubey?
Yes, I think they felt the lack of a wrist spinner because this is one of the only team that has played virtually the whole season after Amit Mishra went without a wrist spinner. No team does that. But having said that, the pitch that is used today is not the one which we saw in the last game, so it's not as slow. And I don't think it's an exciting, change that is going to really reflect in the outcome of the game. Like Tom mentioned right at the start, I'm only focusing on Delhi Capital batting. If they sort that out, they'll be okay because they've got enough bowlers. And when I talk about sorting out their batting, the batting order.
Again, Tom, it's one of those things, right? I don't know how tempted you would have been to give a leg spinner who's played just the one game, a slot in the 11 for the qualifiers, and whether you would have rather gone for a more tried, tested, safe, balanced option. Is this an X factor selection, and does it excite you in some ways? Like Sanjay says, it perhaps doesn't.
Well, if it's an X, it's not a capital X for me. Given the fact that he's played the one game, he's young, inexperienced. Look, I don't mind it. It's not a disaster. But as I said up front, what would concern me if I was Delhi Capital's captain is if David Warner's still there and batting at the 12th over. Are you going to roll the dice and bowl him for an over? Because I know for a fact David Warner will target him and try to take him down for a big over.
Simple as that. Now, speaking of the Delhi Capitals captain, I don't want to go too much into reading body language and signs and whatnot, but at the toss, Shreyas Iyer had to name two changes and he couldn't remember one of them. He was asked by Mark Nicholas what the batting order would be when Shimron Hetmeyer now on the side. And I've seen that with some captains. Sometimes you just straight say, I'll be opening with XYZ and, that's it. And some captains like to keep it very close to their chest, even though within 20 minutes or half an hour, because you're batting first, the world is going to know anyway. I don't know if you read too much into that, whether you sense a bit of nerves or, a captain under pressure, which is understandable, I guess.
Sometimes there's extreme calmness as well, because Inzi once made 4 changes and Ramiz at the toss asked him what the 4 changes were. And he said Abdul Razak goes out, and then he started looking into the sky for some kind of intervention. He just forgot all the other players that, he had dropped. So that can happen. But with Shreyas Iyer, Ronak, let's be sort of understanding of this guy, young player, given the captaincy, because Gautam Gambhir left at the start of the season. So he's not somebody who has done this job a lot and not seasoned. And we can read a lot actually through the body language of players from a distance. I mean, that's our job as commentators very often, to reach conclusions from just what we see there. And yes, when you look at the two captains, it's easy to see the one that is a little anxious of the two.
Yeah, and we speak of Prithvi Shaw and Pant quite a bit. Shreyas Iyer's season's gone off as well, Tom, hasn't it? Big player for them, and it's on these occasions that you tend to wonder whether, when you give a young player the captaincy, whether it in any way affects his own game, his own batting. And even though you think that Ricky Ponting is a significant force in decision-making for the Capitals, whether Shreyas Iyer, the Delhi captain, has ended up hampering Shreyas Iyer, the Delhi batsman?
Possibly. But what would concern me if I was part of the Delhi Capital management is the number of batsmen that have fallen in a hole. Yes, you can expect in a tournament 1, maybe 2 in your top 6 and 7, having their challenges, but not 4 or 5 of them. And that's what's been going on. So that to me is a disturbing trend, and I'd like to know and dig deeper to why that possibly is the case, and be a part of the review that they'll have at the end of the season to try to uncover the reasons why they've got so many high quality players out of form.
Right. Quickly, can I give a convenient sort of connection and make you think about it? Is the guy that we're talking about going woefully out of form are Shaw, Iyer and Pant, and what's common between those 3 is youth, bit of an inexperience. They all have the skills, have the power of the T20 game. So I think going forward, maybe IPL owners start looking at somebody who's also able to soak in the pressure.
All right. Enjoy this, boys. Marcus Stoinis has walked out with Shikhar Dhawan to open the batting. So thoughts, first from Tom Moody.
Okay, so Stoinis is there. Well, okay. Interesting. I don't mind it. Look, I don't mind it because Stoinis has spent his Big Bash career as an opening bat. He's clearly in some good form, showed some good form in the last game with a half century when he came in when they were 3-0. It just means that Rahani's going to bat 3 and be that sort of insurance batsman at 3 to, if they do lose a wicket, you feel quite comfortable and safe that you've got a class player like him coming in.
So does Stoinis have the role then, Sanjay, of just having a free hand, taking them on, trying to put the opposition under pressure?
I don't like the move for 2 reasons. Ajinkya Rahane goes at number 3, so his value and possible, potential value that he adds to that batting is reduced considerably when he bats at number 3. I don't think he's the kind of a guy who can play the anchor role and take this team to the 16th and 17th like a Kane Williamson can do. And Stoinis on a hard pitch with fast bowling, coming at him would have been a great choice like you have in the BPL. But when you have somebody like a Sandeep Sharma bowling at you and a Jason Holder and a pitch that has a tendency, especially in the first half, to be really slow, my fingers are crossed because this is not going to be easy for Stoinis' kind of game that he has.
I'm absolutely loving these sides throwing up these surprises in the playoffs. Tells you everything you need to know. Virat Kohli chooses Marcus Stoinis. Yes, Tom.
But doesn't that tell you something though? The sides that are throwing up these curveballs are the sides that are still unsure how to play their best game.
And that tells you something. Sunrisers, we have gone through an entire show. We haven't even referenced Tom Moody's former sides playing 11. That's because they're so settled all of a sudden. It's now a boring conversation around the Sunrisers. You know exactly what to expect from them. They're going to be so good. They've picked the same team. David Warner mentions that Ridhiman Saha, unfortunately, has not recovered. They've gone with the exact same team, Tom. Vijay Shankar remains sidelined with a hamstring injury. There's perhaps the only case that could have come in was Abhishek Sharma for a Priyam Garg, who didn't do much last game either. But are you happy with that team? Just quickly before we sign off.
Yeah, look, I'm happy that it's unchanged. I think a winning side, you need to keep, a consistent playing 11 unless there's an absolute standout selection that needs to take place because of a matchup against an opponent. So stability in selection is really important.
Sanjay, Priyam Garg, someone you picked it off at least last game, but better use that.
Yeah, but you can understand, then giving that opportunity, you don't want to change the winning combination. I was only looking for Saha if there was some last-minute surprise that he would get into the playing 11, which would make them a much stronger team, but isn't to be.
All right. There's very little that we've not said about Sunrisers that we haven't before. So please go have a look at any of our shows. We've all been for praise for Sandeep Sharma, for Rashid Khan, for Jason Holder, and everyone who just gets their job right in that wonderful unit. But let's keep an eye out on how these 20 overs go for the Delhi Capitals. Let's hope for the sake of a good game that some of these moves actually take off. And we'll pick up thoughts at halftime with Sanjay Manjrekar and Tom Moody on Whirlpool Presents ESPN Cricket for T20 Timeout, powered by Dell.